Rabbi Roth has been teaching Talmud, Chumash, and conflict resolution at Pardes for the past 15 years. He holds a PhD in conflict resolution and an MA in Talmud. Rabbi Roth, I hand it over to you.
Evan, and it's a great honor to be with all of you today. Just a correction, I will say it's 9 o'clock by you, it's 7 o'clock at night by me. I'm joining from Jerusalem, and I imagine you're all in different time zones. It's a great honor to be part of this very special series, this webinar series that the Mussar Institute is providing. And your previous two speakers, Rabbi Amy Eilberg and Rabbi David Jaffe, are both colleague friends. They've been mentors of mine, and it's just a privilege to be the third special series, and I know there are many more great speakers to come. With my topic, I just want to say just a brief word about, just go to the second slide for a moment, Evan. Okay. Just very briefly, as Evan mentioned, I've been teaching at Pardes, which is located in Jerusalem, for about 15 years. And Pardes, for those of you who don't know, it's a non-denominational adult program for over 40 years. And for about 10 years, I have been dreaming of how to integrate my passion for text, for study text, with passion for conflict resolution and peace building. And I'm fortunate that Pardes has taken on as a core part of our mission. And 5 years ago, we established the Center for Judaism and Conflict Resolution. And we now program both Jerusalem courses that go very in-depth study and learning about practitioners here in the country. And we have a program for Jewish middle schools. This slide is actually in animation, so you could see them all popping up at different times. So the 10 slide is for our 15 Jewish day schools, middle schools that are running programs about what does it mean to be a Rodef Shalom, to be a priest within the classroom, within their community. We're running training teachers. The bottom right is we have programs for how to integrate this into law offices, how they be more mindful of how they engage in conflict and represent clients. On the bottom, you can see what I believe Rabbi Eilberg talked about in her about our create a new Jewish holiday, or a new holiday that we called the Nadar Project, that we had synagogues and schools and communities around the world engaging in just a few ago. We all tried to mark this within Israeli society, but not only within the Jewish community, also amongst non-Jews that live in Israel. Rebrand that. In addition, I also run a program which focused on not just Judaism and conflict resolution at Bar Ilan University, that has English-speaking programs in the summer. And then finally, last but not least, my colleague Rabbi Amy Eilberg direct, which is called the Rodef Shalom Communities Program, which is really about these values, these texts, and these skills to rabbis, lay leaders, and congregations throughout North America. Introduction. Let's go back to the first slide for a moment. I emphasize also, as Evan said, please, if you have any questions throughout our text study today, please do write into chat. And if I don't catch it, Evan, please stop me and let me know. I'd love to take questions as we go through and not just try to remember them right at the end. So, topic, we're calling between yelling and frustration and constructive communication. And hoping that this will be in all our different human interactions. whether in dealing with our children, our significant other, our workplace, and within the political climate of how we engage in difficult conversations. What can text and values are to help us be more equipped for dealing with the most difficult issues? No? Okay. So let's go on to the source sheet. Tochachah will be translated as rebuking someone or admonishing someone, and it is often associated with basically yelling at someone, telling them that they're wrong. That is not often associated with constructive communication. And part of the question that we're going to explore is, can this Jewish value, the method of engaging conversation, serve as a process for discussing difficult conversations? I want to start our conversation with a biblical verse. As you can see, source in Leviticus 19:17. That everyone just mute their great, thank you. In Leviticus, reads as follows: You should hate your kinsfolk, or achicha, your brother, in your heart. Rebuke your kinsman and incur guilt because of him, or we will because of them, because of her. Three parts of this verse. Okay, part is hatred in your heart. A part, rebuke, and the third, incur because of their person. And look at a prayer, at an early verse, an early text. What we want to do is just start to explore what are the different ambiguities, what are the different questions that come up when we look at this verse. And the commentaries also were coupled by certain parts of verse. For what's the relationship? Is the relationship between not in your heart and rebuking them? What would that mean? Second, what is it that they're talking about that we might incur because of him? What else? What does it mean that as a result of rebuking someone not going to nosechet, guilt, or some kind of sin? When there are ambiguities within a verse, it invites the commentaries to become creative and efforts adding in their wisdom about how to read this verse. So first I'll mention that is a strong reading of this verse, not before you, that reads the full stop after the words, you should hate your kinsfolk in your heart. That one mitzvah, that one obligation that you put in your heart, almost there's like a new verse. You also have a commandment to rebuke people when they're doing something wrong. But there's any connection between the first part of the verse and the second part of the verse. And often it seems Talmud in this verse. I want to take and acknowledge that, and I apologize I didn't say this from the beginning, but I want to take this opportunity and acknowledge footnote number 1. If we look carefully, that this Tochachah, as means of constructive communication, has been explored and analyzed from a wonderful scholar and Mussar named Dr. Chaim Kaminsky. I should have him as a friend and colleague, who I believe joined us on the call. And I will add that by Kaminsky, if you can hear me, that if there's anything I should say over the hour that slightly wrong, that might be perhaps misleading, please gently demonstrate how to rebuke a little bit of Tochachah, and then we'll get so we'll be able to learn. There's no better than getting Tochah than the world's expert of how to do Tochah. Okay, so Rabbi Kaminsky has also pointed out, however, that read the different parts of the verse as all being connected. And respond to hatred in your heart by not but by speaking to the person and rebuking them. If you do that, the result will be you won't incur sin. Go down a little bit. I want to take a look at the first commentary we're going to invite into our webinar, the Rashbam, the grandson of famous commentary Rashi. He follows. Okay, you do not hate your kinsfolk in your heart. Hate him in your heart. Rather, see how he hurts the word rather that's missing from the verse. There's an alternative to hating someone in your heart. Rather, rebuke him undid. And this will be peace. The result of bringing up what's on your heart, what's real in you when you discuss it, and we'll talk about how you do that in the proper way. It doesn't always work. Is there's between you. So the end result of the Tochah process, and we'll see texts that speak to this. The result of bringing it up is that you're supposed to bring about peace. You're not supposed to yell at the guy and feel like, boy, I told him. That's not. But this add in more light. What is this sin that you might incur if you don't speak out, if you don't rebuke? As we roll down a little bit to look at the Ramban. I see I can do that. Okay. One ability happens when I do bring up what's bothering on my heart. We affect what result of such a conversation. Pay attention to what he said. And they'll not hate your kinsfolk in your heart. He does something to against your will. Word again, rather, meaning don't in your heart, rather rebuke him, saying, why to me? Right? First, giving us a tip about how you do the process of Tochah. We'll come back and see this further in other commentaries. You stick question. Why? I want to be curious. What's the result? What's the guilt? And incur guilt because of him, to hatred for him, because in your rebuking him, he will apologize to you, or repent and admit his sin and be atoned. Meaning, what successful process? What when you in this difficult conversation, the eye is going to learn new information that they know beforehand, or internalize to the full. That new information, they're going to say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I did that. I learned something. I want to try to repent. I really, really feel terrible. I apologize." Now, it's clear that doesn't always happen. Bring up a difficult conversation. So Implicit in the words of the Ramban is you've got to be able to engage in this difficult conversation in a way that the other person will be able to hear you, learn, be able to internalize and say, oh my gosh, I really didn't realize I feel terrible. Result of engaging in a constructive Tochachah process, other side will have learned something, internalize your message, and apologize. Sin that could have occurred would have kept it in my heart, and the other person would have continued to do wrong and not realize it, and I would have continued to hate that person. Other commentaries take the result of a Tochachah process in a different direction. It's that they're going to learn something new. But take a look at the Ibn Ezra. He lived just before Ramban, and the Ramban been kind of arguing with him. Ezra says, rebuke, perhaps you respect him for a matter and not so. And the reason that it says, and do not incur guilt because of him, because you will be punished as a result of what you do or think of the other person. Meaning, what's the effect of rebuking the other person, of saying words of Tochachah? If they're going to apologize for doing something wrong to you, according to Ibn Ezra, but I end up having to apologize to them because I suspected them wrongly of something that they didn't do, accusing them. And this Tochai process, wow, this person's really annoying me. They're really upsetting me. And it's in my heart, a person, engage them in conversation. The result, according to the Ibn Ezra, is for the sin of falsely accusing them of doing something they didn't do, and punished of what's called in rabbinic terminology choshed b'ksherim. I'm suspicious of people that were indeed innocent. Commentary, if I can roll down a little bit for us.
At the page one, Rabbi.
Yeah, so you can go on to page. If you go on to page 1, I'll already mention, in his book that I mentioned, it's forthcoming. It's not yet published. It will be coming out soon, hopefully within the where one of the later legal authorities who write the actual mitzvah of Tochachah, if you look at footnote number 2, where he said upon the wording of the Rishonim of these early authorities, as the Ibn Ezra, right? It says, who discussed Tochachah, it is logical that this mitzvah is fulfilled by the reprover listening, not talking. Therefore, the person who's offering the Tochachah has to be prepared to listen to the response of his friend, and he is open to talk, and here to listen, and I'll add to learn, and accept his friend's response. He does not fulfill the mitzvah. So, saying you're doing something wrong, able to hear it. It's also perhaps I'm going to walk away having learned something from this conversation. Let's go down to page 2 now. Okay. Another one of the commentaries on the Bible, the last one that we're going to discuss before we move on. But it's still worth reading because he expands upon it in such a beautiful way. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. If your brother does something that upsets you, don't hate your heart. Rather, there's that again. How do you deal with the hatred in your heart? him, that never listen and discuss the matter with him in a respectful manner and say to him, do this to me. Since it's possible, he never intended what you had thought, or didn't, or he couldn't himself, or he will give some other explanation. Meaning, I interpreted the situation. They had a different context, they had a different reading. Through this, meaning, the mitzvah of Tochachah, you will realize that he never did something improper to you. And in doing, you say because of him, we're in baseless hatred towards him. There's this concern that if I say it, then I should convince my interpretation of what just happened because the correct one, and something or didn't do something that really upsets me, and end up engaging in conversation, they're convinced that I might have interpreted it incorrectly, and for no reason I'm upset with them. And we could have the air. I think just started the discussion. If we find the Rabban on one hand, and the on Bechor Shor on the other hand, and we do the Tochachah process correctly, could be more results, including learn something new from the conversation that they didn't know previously. The side I'm approaching with important, difficult will apologize, and perhaps I will apologizing. There's something I didn't know, and I misjudged the person. That is not like screaming and rebuking the other side. That is describing a process of constructive communication, a process of a learned conversation. I want to go into more legal text, okay? Exactly some details, the guidelines, the tips, if you will, or how do we go about engaging such a learned conversation in the process of Tochachah. Again, I want to encourage that if anyone has any questions about so far, please feel free to use the chat and to ask. Okay. I'd like to invite into our conversation my attendees who were first to codify in generally codified Jewish law, and in particular, to try to map out all the Talmudic and early rabbinic wisdom, how to engage in Tochachah, and to kind of map out for us, if you will, how to engage in a Tochachah conversation. And I'll mention that the book that he's discussing, the laws of how to engage in Tochachah, is a book of knowledge, and in particular in the laws of what's called deot dispositions. And this is really the Rambam's book of Mussar. It is of all the aspects of character traits and of all the later body of work of Mussar. I'd say much of it would be based upon the Rambam's work of Hilchot Deot. Recently had the privilege of getting to learn, finishing this book. My 10-year-old preparing for her bat mitzvah. And it's a great book to learn in chavruta with a study partner, with children, or simply on your own. Basically, spell laws of Tochachah over these four subsections in Hilchot Deot. I didn't bring all of it forward. I'm bringing just a few selections from Hilchot Deot, but hopefully this will suffice. As we go through the laws of the Rambam, I need to try to look for what are the different tips, techniques, guidelines for to engage in a constructive Tochachah process. In chapter 6, subsection, what's known as 6, and it reads as follows: wrongs another, remain silent, despise the person, and the book of Samuel 2, concerning the wind, and I did not speak to Amnon, neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon. Let's for a moment. As we saw in the verse, right, I guess, when one's really upset and feel they've been terribly wronged, the first Rambam says is don't they don't want it to. And later on, we'll see that the Rambam says maybe it's not appropriate to bring things up. But as a general rule, he says it's better to bring up something that's really upsetting you than to keep it buried deep down inside. And the proof text that he brings is from the famous tragic story of two brothers, Am and Absalom, that Am had raped sister, Absalom's sister. Absalom didn't say anything. He didn't say anything good. He didn't say anything bad. He was silent. He kept it deep down buried. And 2 years later, after never really talking about what happened and how angry he was of this tragedy that Amnon had done, Amnon caused a terrible civil war, kills Amnon, and as a result, the whole kingdom comes a terrible clash of violence. Of the Midrash contrast Absalom's silence of keeping his hatred inside that exploded into civil war to others, or to a family of brothers that had terrible early traumas. And that's the story of Joseph and his brothers. That Joseph's brothers also fought along with kids, but the Midrash praises them and says what was in their hearts was in their means we're screaming at each other and yelling at each other and saying how much they were upset with the other one, but they were talking. And because talking, the Midrash that was better than Absalom's silence of not talking at all. So and although Joseph and his brothers years are able to reconcile, even though they went through quite a bumpy beginning in their relationship. So first tip, I think, from the Rambam is really consider how with the anger, with the feeling of wrong that's been done, are we keeping it inside in an unhealthy way? Is there we can discuss it? Even don't discuss it in the most constructive, rational, healthy way. It might sometimes be better to get it out than keep it in and have silent and deep relationship. Later, see that there are alternatives. That sometimes it's best really to keep it in, and not to discuss it and to explore our anger in other ways. Rambam, keep it tucked inside, right? And word again, rather, like we saw the other commentaries, he is come to make the matter known as the person. Why did you do this to me? Why wrong me regarding that matter? And the book of Leviticus, you shall admonish your colleague. Pause there for a moment. Like we saw with Ramban, the step in the Tochachah conversation is starting with a question. When we look at this question, or I'll speak for myself, when I look at these questions, they're the most inviting questions for engaging in a conversation. If somebody sat me down and said, "Hey, Daniel, why do you do this to me?" I'm not sure I would be so forthcoming in really owning up and sharing my feelings. Right? This direct kind of usement instead of statements of, I feel this was done to me, right, are still encouraging engaging in Tochachah from the Rambam's language, right, before the I statement concept, is still urging them to start from a place of curiosity. Remember, this is a learning conversation. You don't know all the facts. There's a good possibility you got this wrong, and we want them to be able to share their story, because otherwise, nothing productive or learning is going to come out of this. I saw just today that says double language in Hebrew, right? It doesn't translate as well, right? It just shall surely admonish. But in Hebrew, you have this double language of tochiach. So some translators explain et atmecha, sort of rebuke yourself and rebuke them, meaning first look inside and then, and to get kind of forming a part of conversation, discuss instead of finger directly at the side. So to start from a place of curiosity, start question. You don't know everything. And continue. And we're of number 6. If afterwards they committed the wrong and to forgive him, he do so. It should not be cruel when forgiving, as said by Genesis 20:17, and Abraham prayed to God. Right? Is similar to what we saw with Nachman with the Ramban, that do this correctly, there might be that the side that you're coming to bring up with will admit that they were mistaken, and forgiveness from you, and cruel. So that's the laws of the Rambam, justice and laws of repentance, how to ask forgiveness and not to be too cruel, and being open to, if you're already bringing it up, what's your goal? Is the goal that they learn something, that they say they're sorry? Are you prepared to also them once they take responsibility for what they did? This might be reading between the lines, but I think it's still in the Rambam. But especially in his language in the Hebrew, in the question that he's asking, he said, Lama asita li kach v'kach? Why did you do this and that? Or this specific. I think that the Rambam is coming and saying, don't just start with one of those generalized questions of why do you always do that? Why are you always late? Why are you always forgetting to take out the garbage? Why are you always... It doesn't help. I think is only focused. And scholars of conflict resolution and communication will to say, pick one or two issues. You would kind of guess that there might have been a moment of ambiguity. Maybe the person might have read it differently. Maybe there were some circumstances you're not seeing. If you start with a blanket statement, the chance of having a learning conversation will be diminished. So therefore, I think the Rambam is saying, be very specific, and from there, it will be urging, more inviting the person to perhaps take ownership and apologize instead of being overwhelmed. Okay, let's do the 7th law, or number 7. This thing the Rambam brings, I'm only bringing a snippet of it, but the Rambam says, if who rebukes a colleague, wrong committed against the person, or of a matter between their colleague and God. Here he's making a distinction between a personal issue, the makom, or between man and God, or people and God, right? Both are concepts that someone might call out these actions. Here, really focusing today on calling out someone's actions when something wrong was done to me or done to someone else. Or between colleague and God, should rebuke the person privately. Right? Speak to the person patiently and gently, inform them that she or he is only making these statements for the colleagues' welfare. So break this up into 2 different parts. The first thing Rambam says is, when you have this difficult conversation, and you're going to be very sensitive issues, you got to create context. Put it in the conference room with everybody there, or if you tell your child with all other kids there or family members there, what everybody else is hearing, that's the way to do the mitzvah of Tochachah. The way to do it is to have conversation in private, pick the right place, right venue, the different conversation, relaxed over a cup of coffee, or in a living room after creating this within a kind of over, is a very different type of conversation than when it's in the midst, in the heat of the moment, and others are watching, which will, of course, affect how people are going to respond, not have it become a tochachah that brings to learning and brings to apology. So the first thing the Rambam says is, speak to the person in private. I think he says is speak to the person patiently and speak in the Hebrew where he says b'lashon raka, b'nat u'b'lashon raka. And here, this text is very strongly into the world of Mussar, because for me to be able to bring up this conversation with someone that's really upsetting me, I have to first do inner work of what's on within me that's going to prepare me in terms of my mindfulness to engage in a conversation with other person. I'm still upset, but I'm so angry, and I'm so emotional that I can't engage in a respectful learning conversation where I'm really going to be curious and be able to bring up this difficult issue in a way that's not going to be threatening and putting the person on the defensive, that it's not to do it. So there's no call here for inner work. That's it. And the encouragement to bringing up the issue, do it patiently and gently. The next we'll talk about a little bit briefer. That is a person colleague not speak to him harshly until he becomes embarrassed. As in Leviticus, you do not bear a sin because of him. He is introducing another interpretation of what is the sin might come as a result of not doing tochachah, not doing tochachah in the right way. Remember when in the Ibn Ezra, here he's saying what might be the sin? The sin might have been embarrassing the person. Don't do it in a smart and constructive way. Bring up this difficult issue. I might end up doing one of the most severe sin in the Torah of being of malin panim, of turning their face white, if you will, and humiliating them when I bring this issue. So the Rambam encourages and says, don't speak to them harshly in a way that's going to embarrass them, because then you'll be the one who is sinning. And what our sages said, should you him to the point changes color, the Torah states you should not bear sin because of him. Note the Rambam's language of saying at first you should speak to your colleague not harshly. Does that mean if it works out, then raise your voice? Maybe try to be a little bit strict and mirrors the person if they're not getting it. Here, again, refer to the forthcoming book of Rabbi Kaminsky, who does a beautiful job of explaining the different commentaries on this particular halacha. And there's a disagreement amongst the commentaries about how to read Maimonides. Some saying no matter what, you don't ever embarrass the other side. They don't get it, but you just keep talking to them softly. You keep on speaking to them in a way that's not going to be humiliating. There are other commentaries, however, say, listen, if it's going to work in this very, very way, they're just not how serious this issue is. There might be another time where it's important to actually speak out very strongly. But again, will you're cool, even though you're demonstrating that you're upset, and will they be affected in a positive way? Precaution, okay? Because these things can really mess up, as we will see soon when we have a few case studies of what happens when people actually tried this at home to actually work or not. And the next and final halacha that the Rambam discusses is biased behavior. If who was wronged by a colleague would rather not admonish him or matter at all. Because the person who wronged him was very boorish, or because he was mentally disturbed in some way, forgives him totally without bearing any feelings of hate or judging him. The Torah is concerned only with those who carry feelings of hate. Here the Rambam's raising ability of what with your anger, what to do with your feeling that you've been wronged. And he says, listen, that best remedy for dealing with anger with your friend is to go and approach them and discuss it. Don't keep it up. Well, it's not okay. There are times dealing with appropriate to struggle conversations with. It'd be counterproductive, either mentally or emotionally not going to get it. Not just talking, and we have to only be talking here of like extreme cases. And the Rambam is disputed, again, as Rabbi Kaminsky will point out in his book, about what exactly he is referring to with this category, this loophole, this exception. But I think you could also read it as who's in front of us right now. Is at a state of mind that they're able to hear and grow from wanting to say to them? Is this going to exacerbate the situation and make it worse? So, what Rambam here is saying is, listen, rule, there are exceptions. As a general rule of thumb, I'm telling you to talk about it. You're going to learn, they're going to learn, everyone's going to benefit. But there are things where I also acknowledge, says the Rambam, it's just not going to work. It's not going to be productive. And what you have to do is, again, that Mussar, that mudasidut, that sort of this moment of saying, I'm going to have to let this go. That is who that person is. I'm not changing them. Maybe my expectations a little bit of what's going to happen. I experienced this not long ago, where I took a conversation with someone. It really didn't work. It just worked, and it took me a while of consulting my wife and consulting with help and doing some deep thinking about maybe this is just all these tactics and all these skills. It's just the person moment that they're just not going to be able to grow from it. It's too sensitive, and sometimes it's better under those circumstances to let it go. Of forgiving the person in your heart and not hold the hatred is still critical, and that within ourselves. I'll take this moment as a shout out for a moment that at Pardes we also have an online programs that are called Elmad, and here I wrote a brief article called 10 Tips for Constructive Feedback from Rambam that looking for a quick summary of what we just said, you could find it there. And on to the next source. Until now, we're talking about the rule of theory, where things go according to plan. You engage a conversation according to the rule of the book, everyone learns and apologizes and grows from it. Now, at 3 or 4 case studies that I've been doing in my forthcoming book on the identity and methods of the third-party peacemaker, or Odef Shalom, the pursuer of peace. And here I look at a few examples of religious rabbis who actually try to use the methodology of Tochachah, of Bruce, and third-siders. What we've been discussing has also been about the issue, right? I'm bringing up with you who I have an issue with. Here, the third side is not a stakeholder in the conflict, but they're serving as a mediator, peacemaker, and they're employing the net of Tochachah. The first case that I briefly is from one of my personal heroes, the Chida, Chaim David Azulai. David Azulai was one of the greatest Talmudists, leaders, mystics, philosophers, but unbelievable people who lived in the 18th century. He grew up in Jerusalem, later lived in the very mystical city of Hebron in the middle 18th century. And he traveled throughout the world, teaching, support the community in Hebron. As a deep mystic, he believed that we are constantly going to be in a state of exile so long as people are having conflict, or fighting over baseless hatred. So as part of his mission, as he would go from community to community, to bring about pursuing peace. And I have a story, and I want to be mindful of our time, but I'll just a little snippet from his personal diary that he wrote, which is really a book of Mussar. See the Baal Mussar, someone who really worked on their midot constantly, kind of writing what they did. And I think with an eye towards people one day reading his travel log to learn how to engage with people. Which again, I'll only touch upon briefly. He discussed conflict when he gets to the city of Ancona, Italy. That a family, the wealthiest family in this city, has not spoken with each other for 12 years. They're in total conflict. Their lawsuits you wouldn't believe. The Pope has been involved. Everybody is trying to solve this conflict. No one has succeeded. Then comes to town, and he about the conflict, and he went to the noblemen, to David and Isaac Cohen, one of the sides of the conflict, and grief came over my young self, and I spoke words of Tochachah to Signor David, and I used him, or I persuaded him such that he would make peace with everyone. And he was to go to Venice after Shana, and that he had to cancel that trip. What Hebrew chutzpah! What incredible capacity that the walks into this community. Hey, you haven't spoken to your brother in 12 years. That's not right. We're going now. It's too much, and please God, read a bit more about this in my book. But that was not your average person. People loved him. People admired him. People saw him as a real Baal Midot. And when the Chida says that to you, people didn't, because they wanted to have that relationship with him. And told this extremely wealthy businessman, you're canceling your trip because we're going to work on making peace with your brother. He listened because he cared. The things that the halakha talks about is who is doing the tocha and to what extent do they really have the ear of the person and will they listen. Not can pull that off. The Chida for 8 months with his family until he worked it through some of their financial issues and bringing about peace between the different members of the family. But don't have that work. I brought another example, case study number 2, where the less respectable finds himself in the most tragic of conflicts in mid-16th century Egypt. I just even tell you what these 2 rabbis were fighting over, but suffice to say it had to do with who was invited to leave after meal at a wedding. As The whole community went into conflict. No one was speaking with anybody, and with everybody, with the other side. Everyone took sides. There was no third party left to make peace, except for this one respected but still wonderful Rabbi Moses Benjamin. And I'm not going to read it inside. He describes his effort over Passover to go every day, try to go to this Rabbi Tibon, one side of the conflict, and do words of Tochachah to him that he has to make peace with the rabbi. It doesn't work. Matter of fact, all it did was exacerbate the situation, make this Rabbi Tibon more upset. He starts cursing the peacemakers, and then they walk away frustrated. This Tochachah, to me, both and in the previous example, do sound like a learning conversation. They sound much more like they're kind of telling him that he's wrong, and as a result, he's being very harshly. Kind of what we saw in the theories of the Rambam and the theories of the commentary. And one example that I'll touch upon very briefly because I want to leave a few minutes for questions. A story, again, two rabbis in conflict in the small city, Italy, of Cannadia. Rabbis get involved with very different approaches of how to try to work through their conflict. The first was by Moshe al-Ashkar. Rabbi Moshe al-Ashkar tried to use the method of Tochachah, and he tells this Rabbi Judah, who he says is wrong, he tells some very strong words of Tochachah. He tells things like, and I'm going to just skip around, why go to the teachers of children to learn from them since you did not speak correctly? And who is blind like you that you do not understand the words of the rabbis and you did not come within their secrets and from your heart you fall them. These are personal attacks. He's looking him, he's saying I'm doing Tochachah, but he's really swinging him very, very harshly. And after he says, you're even children, Evan, if you can move on to number 4 for me, that any child would know the laws better than you did, and you're making such a terrible mistake. At the very end, he says, and you just know that I'm doing all this out of love, and I'm doing this because I trust that you'll accept my words of Tochachah and grow from it. And the conflict only increases, and the rabbi that he's rebuking, who's in the conflict, gets more angry. And that method of try speaking gently, then a little bit harsher, then more harsher, because I tried using lukewarm water, now I'm using boiling water to scold you for how wrong you are. Didn't work. And I mentioned that another rabbi tried to use a different method. I'll wrap up. The Maharami of Padua, the mayor of Logan, and I can't read this inside right now, but he says, you're this engaged in the wrong way. He's actually, instead of telling one side they're wrong and yelling at them more and calling that Tochachah, I say you do Tochachah to both sides. Try telling the perspective. Try acting, as he says, as a Rodef Shalom, the pursuer of peace. And here, we're introduced to a different method of engaging. Instead of just yelling with her, we're engaging in a process of pursuit of peace, which is the ability to see both sides and have each side acknowledge the story of the other. And if you look very bottom, he says, Rabbi, you should have yelling at only one side. You should have listened and talked to each side so that they would have wanted to reconcile. And that Rabbi counsel you saying, be like a Rodef Shalom, be a pursuer of peace, is from the pursuer of peace coming from Aaron. And just look at number 5 for a moment. This will not read inside, but it contrasts Moses' leadership to Aaron's. Moses' method when somebody did something wrong was to yell at them with Tochachah, telling people wrong. And the Messiah didn't. He got the method through the pursuit of peace. He did them in some way without going on the defensive, to think different and to really internalize the message. When doing Tochachah successfully or some other kind of method, hard to say. I want to advocate for thinking of how do we engage in these difficult conversations. Is it just a scream match, or is it really a learning conversation? Can we read ourselves as a pursuer piece with the other side, or as a third trying about peace? And various sources that I brought up state what it is, and that so few people really know how to receive Tochachah, so few people know how to offer Tochachah. But hopefully through this text study, we feel the Midrash says in the last source here that do it correctly, what brings to love and peace. And that there is no real peace or real love without engaging in a proper Tochachah. So I'm not leaving much time for questions, but maybe I was hoping people would be chatting in during. Can we a few questions quickly?
Anyone who has a question at this point should please type it into the chat box on their window, and the rabbi will respond.
I'm open. Anyone responses or questions? My email is here. Be happy to field questions offline as well, and to be in touch. And to join for any other programs that are constantly trying to integrate Jewish texts with conflict resolution. And again, maybe I'll just read this last source to conclude. This Jess Rabbah, which I think speaks volumes of what we're trying to do, where it says, Josie Nina said, reproof leads to love. As it's proof, a wise person, and he will love you. So Rabbi Yossi Hanina's view for said, love unaccompanied by reproof without Tochachah is not love. If we have a loving relationship, we're able to do Tochachah. We're able to really talk about difficult conversations and learning will grow. As Lakish adds, the Tochachah leads to peace. Hence, Abraham reproved Avimelech. Is his view for peace unaccompanied by reproof, that alone without Tochachah, without being able to engage in our difficult conversation, is not Shalom. And this, I will say, Shalom, and have a wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Rabbi, this is recorded and will be available to everyone to view. Thank you. We look forward to having you speak again. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and have a wonderful day.
Take care.